what he's setting out in terms of unfunded tax cuts and spending increases, it is like Liz Truss's mini budget on steroids. We are already paying a heavy price for that.
Labour says the Conservatives lied when it said the party would increase taxes on working families by £2,000. But on Panorama last night, Rishi Sunak was not in the mood for backing down. Why not?
Because it's right. And the choice of this election is clear. We are going to keep cutting people's taxes. You'll see that in our manifesto tomorrow. You've seen it in the announcements that we've already made. Labour Party are going to put people's taxes up. There are 27 different policies that underpin that figure. Of those 27, 21 are produced by independent Treasury officials, available online for people to see. 3 come from other government sources, 2 come from the Labour Party themselves, and 1 comes from an independent investment bank. Every single one of them is available, transparent, and you top them all up, and it amounts to £2,000 worth of tax rises.
Let's speak to Labour Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Morning.
Good morning. He makes Boris Johnson sound honest.
Well, what he thinks it's absolutely nailed on. He was asked twice about it, and he gave exactly the same answer, exactly the same numbers, 27 policies, and he broke it down. They're absolutely sticking to this line. And that must be worrying for you because people are still discussing £2,000 extra tax.
I think it is such an act of desperation, and we're going to see that today with the Conservative manifesto, the most expensive panic attack in history. They will say anything, they will promise anything, hoping that people in this country will give the matches back to the arsonist to finish the job. And I think people can see the consequences of 14 years of Conservative government and the failure it's brought, but they are also feeling the pain of reckless decisions made in Downing Street by Conservative prime ministers and chancellors. And we'll see when this manifesto is published today that what he's setting out in terms of unfunded tax cuts and spending increases, it is like Liz Truss's mini budget on steroids. We are already paying a heavy price for that. And by contrast, and the choice when we get to Thursday and Labour's manifesto, people will be able to see that every promise we make is a promise we can keep and the country can afford.
Okay,
we are resisting this race to the
right.
bottom with the
Okay.
Conservatives.
So
we would much rather set out our stall with honest and harder choices, because that's what responsible government looks like.
Okay, well, let's ask some honest, try and get some honest answers then, as much as we can, because I understand that, you know, the manifesto is not out yet. When the Conservatives say that because of your policies, working households will have to pay £2,000 extra in tax over 4 or 5 years, can't remember what it was, is that categorically 100% untrue?
It is just not true. And when our manifesto is published on Thursday, people will be able to see what we're proposing to invest in and how we're proposing to raise the money. And they will see the fairer choices the Labour government would make.
Okay.
Things like clamping down on tax avoidance, closing the remaining non-dom loopholes, the windfall tax, real windfall tax on the big oil and gas giants. Those are fairer choices, because we know that with the tax burden running as high as it is, what we can't do is what the Conservatives have done, which is pick the pockets of working people as the first and last resort, which is why Rachel Reeves has ruled out increases in income tax, national insurance and VAT to give people.
Well, they're cutting national insurance for the third time. Well, they're promising to cut national insurance for the third time by 2p.
Yeah, but I mean, not only have they been putting national insurance up, if I came on your programme and said I was going to take 2p off national insurance without explaining how it'd be funded, I would be crucified by you and other broadcasters. And that's exactly what should happen to Conservative spokespeople.
But they have, okay. But to be fair to them, they have said how they'll fund it. And it's this, half of it is the same way that you will, which is cracking down on tax avoidance and reforming the welfare system.
Well, 2 things. Firstly, the welfare savings they say that they can achieve are already baked into the government baseline. They've been priced up by the Office for Budget Responsibility, and that money has been spent. And on closing down on tax avoidance, that can be done, but the National Audit Office was clear that you also have to give HMRC the tools to do the job, whether that's better tech and also more people. Rachel Reeves has put that into her spending assumptions in terms of how much she thinks she can raise and how much it will cost in terms of investment in HMRC's resources. The Conservatives haven't. So they just haven't done the work on this. And, the easiest thing for us to do as an opposition party at this stage would be to say, oh, well, if the Tories are saying they're going to raise 12 billion through welfare savings, well, we'll say the same thing and we'll spend 12 billion pounds on lots of lovely Labour things that Labour would like to do. But we're not going to do that because it's not real. It's like monopoly money. And you would have thought they would have learned the lessons from Liz Truss's disastrous mini budget.
Okay.
The money is not there. He is making promises he can't keep and the country can't afford.
Well, many people will say that the money isn't there, and whatever you want to do, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to put something up, or maybe continue to freeze tax thresholds, or you're going to have to cut public spending. So on taxes, Labour have been very keen to list which taxes will not go up. But you haven't mentioned capital gains tax. And the front of the Financial Times today, Labour's reluctance to rule out capital gains tax rise stokes investment fears. So are you going to put up capital gains tax?
Well, I can reassure people that nothing in Labour's manifesto requires us to put up capital gains tax. So that's the reassurance we can provide. The reason Rachel has been so explicit on income tax, national insurance and VAT is to provide that explicit message to kind of almost hit voters on the nose with it, so people know when they're worried about their pay slips and how much is going out in tax, they know that a Labour government will not make things worse for them. And on VAT, that was important too, because the VAT rises, that's been the Tories' favourite tax for donkey's years now, going back to Mrs. Thatcher. They love VAT, they love hiking it up, but it's a regressive tax and we won't be increasing VAT.
But if you're the party of business, why won't you be explicit on capital gains tax? Because that's worrying for businesses. Let me just quote Sir James Waits, who's chair of the Institute for Family Business. The whole thing about capital gains tax is it becomes a disincentive to growth. And the Labour Party has said how important growth is. So if Rachel Reeves is being explicit about taxes that affect working people, why not be explicit on taxes which affect businesses and people who have assets?
Well, people will see on Thursday that we are being explicit about how we're raising money and where we're investing money. And that's really important.
But that's not the same thing, is it? That's not the same thing.
Rachel Reeves has also been clear that she thinks that we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years and that it's important that we try and bring that tax burden down. And the way to do that is to get our economy back to growth, because if the economy was growing at the same rate under the Conservatives that it grew under the last Labour government, there'd be about £30 billion to either invest in our public services or give back to people through tax cuts. We've also been clear throughout this election campaign and in advance of this election campaign that we want Britain to have a dynamic market economy, that we want to attract business, we want to attract business investment. We're going to provide the stability in the economy, that bedrock of a strong economy to unlock business investment. We've got a great relationship with business. That's why we've seen so many business endorsers coming out for Labour. We're going to work in partnership with business. You're not going to see Rachel taking measures that harm our international competitiveness or disincentivise business investment and job creation in this country. Rachel Reeves is the Chancellor the country is crying out for. She is a former economist at the Bank of England. She's made hard choices as Shadow Chancellor and shown she's prepared to make the tough choices needed as Chancellor. What a contrast to what we are hearing from the Conservatives during this election campaign. They will say anything, they will promise anything, they will spend anything to keep themselves in power. Rishi Sunak's prepared to put other people's homes at risk in order to keep his home on Downing Street, and I think that's reckless and irresponsible.
I mean, you keep saying that they will say anything to stay in power, and the accusation that will be levelled at Keir Starmer and yourselves is that you will say nothing because you are way ahead in the polls and you don't want to upset the apple cart.
On the contrary, I sat in Labour's manifesto meeting last week where the manifesto was agreed. And as I read through the whole document, I was looking right across the priorities of the country: education, health, crime and policing, energy and climate change, and the running of the economy itself. And I thought, what a difference we will be able to make to this country if we're given the chance. We make no apology whatsoever for making tough decisions. The reason why people will be able to trust Labour's manifesto on Thursday is not only because every promise we make will be a promise we can keep and the country can afford. People have seen very publicly Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, myself and other members of Labour Shadow Cabinet saying very clearly and very loudly no to a whole load of demands of things that people would like us to do. In some cases, good Labour things we'd like to do, because we can't be sure we could keep that promise or the country could afford it. And in that discipline is the credibility that should generate trust in Labour to change our country.
I understand that. I will say that from our listeners and some people who are thinking about voting Labour, Wes Streeting, there is still a little bit of a credibility gap between whether you are going to be able to fund everything you want to do by, for example, non-dom tax, and also VAT on private schools, and on cracking down on tax evasion, those kind of things. So there is still a gap, and people will have to make up their own minds when they see your manifesto on Thursday. But thank you for talking to us. That's Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting.